Good afternoon and welcome to today's Adweek webinar, where we'll be looking at ways that you can harness the power of community to build your brand. And our webinar today is being sponsored by Typeform. I'm Stuart File, Vice President of Branded Content at Adweek, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I just want to take a few moments here and make sure that everybody knows what to expect from our event today, and also that you are all familiar with the features of our webinar platform. Our presentation today is going to be primarily conversational between our two speakers, and it should go somewhere in the 30-35 minute range. Afterwards, we are going to have plenty of time for audience questions, and we know when there's a topic like community, people have questions because, well, we are all parts of our various communities, and understanding ways to leverage that for marketing, pretty critical for a lot of people. So if you have a question for our speakers, I just want to invite you, please ask it using the question tool that you should see there on your screen. It should be right underneath the video window where you're seeing me right now. So use that to submit your questions, and we're going to get to as many audience questions as we can following our live event. It's not too late, by the way, to invite your colleagues to come and join us today. We'd love to have them here. To make that easy on you, we sent everybody a final reminder email for today's webinar, probably about 15 minutes ago. In that email, you are going to find a link to the registration page. So it's in the form of a bit.ly. So grab that link, send it off to your colleagues. They still have lots of time to register. Come on in and join us live. But if they can't make it live, today's webinar is being recorded. It will be available on demand. And we're sending you a link to that on-demand version later this afternoon. So check your email about 3:30, 4 o'clock Eastern time. You'll get that link. And certainly feel free to share that with your colleagues as well. Usually I'd like to remind people that the slides are available for download, and you will be able to grab a PDF of today's slide deck in the event resources area. But just a quick word that it's a very limited deck. As I said, it's mostly conversational. So the slides are pretty much the title slide, the speaker slide, and our speakers will be sharing some takeaways later on. So again, you can grab those in the event resources area. You'll find that PDF. Finally, I just want to remind everyone to please check out the Adweek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars. Here we are halfway through summer, and well, we've got another webinar this week, and then our August schedule, while slightly lighter than usual, we're still doing 1, 2, sometimes 3 webinars every single week. So see what's coming up, lots of different topics, plenty of things on. We've got community today, but we've got things on CTV and effective marketing processes and, well, all the topics that really sort of top of mind for marketers. We've got some things actually coming up. We're going to have someone from the Indiana Pacers talking about fan engagement coming up. Lots of different topics. See what's there. Sign up for an upcoming webinar. You can also check out our entire archive of on-demand webinars, all at www.adweek.com/webinars. So let's move on to today's event, and let me just take a quick moment here and introduce our speakers. From our sponsors at Typeform, we're going to be joined by Karrie Sanderson, who's Typeform's CMO. With a title like that, as you can imagine, she leads brand strategy, advertising, PR, comm, DEI, and the creative studio. Karrie is really an experienced marketer and brand leader, holding these kinds of roles at places like Smartsheet, Starbucks, Coca-Cola. Our guest speaker today, we're really excited, almost as excited as she is, and that is Espree Devora, who's the founder of WeAreLATech, and she does the Women in Tech podcast. Again, Espree is a prolific podcaster. She's been doing it now since 2013. She's a champion for women in tech globally. You, again, probably heard her on a variety of podcasts. She's also been featured in places like Forbes, Entrepreneur, Harper's Bazaar, Inc., and many more. And I know you're going to enjoy the conversation with her today. So with that in mind, you guys have probably all heard enough from me. So let me bring Karrie and Espree up here to begin our webinar today. Karrie, Espree, welcome.
Hello. Hello. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, what a great intro, and appreciate Adweek hosting these webinars, as well as I know it sounds like there's a lot of fun ones coming up, so I'll be sure to check that out.
Definitely. So, thank you for allowing us to have this conversation about something both Karrie and I are so passionate about.
Amazing. Yeah. And Espree, especially, thank you so much for joining us. It's a privilege to have this conversation with you. We've had a few prep calls, and I can't wait to dig in and have the audience hear your perspective and how the different perspectives that we have on community and the alignment. You have a really long history of building communities, and I'm excited to talk about your experience for there. I think the first thing that would be really good to do is kind of level set on what we mean by the term community, right? Like this can be used pretty broadly, and there's a lot of different definitions of what it may be. So I'd love to hear your perspective on how you kind of define it, your view of it, and how, and we'll get into a little bit more about what role you think it might play in terms of overall success or building a company or a brand. So I'll totally. There's a lot of questions there, but I'd love to just hear your general thoughts. Yeah.
I think the number one thing people need to think about when thinking about community is we all just want to feel seen. And a community is a place in its essence of where we can all feel connected and be seen together. So it's so much more than a platform. Like usually we're like, oh, start a circle, start a LinkedIn, start a this, or, we have all these vague things. But at the essence of it all is, are we enabling all of the people in our community to feel seen and to remember that our job is to serve a community, not to build a community. So many times we use that word build, rather than how can we truly go out of our way to serve our community? So again, the community member feels seen.
Yeah, I think I talked about that difference between it, and serve puts the community member at the center, where build puts yourself at the center. And if you want that to have the longevity, if you want it to have the impact and grow, the organic growth and be the what you envision it to be, keeping that community member and serving what's important to them in front and center is really important.
100%.
Yeah, I think so. And so, obviously community is one piece of how you might be able to do what, to accomplish your marketing plan or whatever you're trying to do. Like, what role do you think community plays in that ecosystem that you're thinking about for whatever you're trying to do?
I think one of the biggest problems is that we need to create a space where people could feel safe and vulnerable to form that connection, to be seen. And that gets lost a lot of the time. We're so busy focused on social posting and calling that community rather than creating a place of how can we enhance that shared memory amongst multiple people? A great way to do that, I actually use Typeform in a lot of my community building. No joke, not just because I'm here. It's a massive part. And it's because I want to curate community. So I create a lot of invitations, a lot of questions, so I could truly get to know who I am serving and then invite them into experiences that form connection between others in the community. So yeah.
Yeah, you're on the lookout for those common themes and interests that people may have and helping them make those connections, and then making that connection, and then the magic can go from there. So within the community, it sounds like you're facilitating a lot of smaller connections that help build the strength of the collective.
100%. I'm curious. Okay, so I'm focused on the indie creator and bringing together, the Los Angeles tech community or the global women in tech community. But you're doing something that scares me. You're building a community around a product, around a brand. How does community building differ when it comes to company community building versus indie creator community building like I do?
Yeah. I think there's some shared goals or shared threads, right? When you're building around a company, people tend to, the thing they have in common at the beginning is they're usually often trying to figure out, how do I use this product? How can I be most successful? Where can I get some inspiration on how to be better? But within those interactions, you start to find these other connections. It's like sitting next to somebody on a plane. We talked about this, like your commonality is that you're both on that same flight. But as you kind of talk to each other, you find these other points of interest or inspiration, sometimes not even related to what you came there for, but they make it personal. They get to know people as human beings within that community, and other groups form, and you can count on those people. So when you're building something like that as a company brand, as a company community, you have to think about, again, you're there to serve them. It's not just all about like, how to use Typeform. Let things happen organically. Let folks talk about what's important to them, and then listen and learn, because that can give you some signal as to what people need more of, what they want to hear more of from you, not just in the community channels, like the platforms you're talking about, but as a company overall. Those are your most loyal followers. They're the ones who really want to succeed, and helping them do that and letting them give a platform for sharing it authentically and what it means to them is the best thing you can do for your brand, is giving them that platform, turning the microphone over to them. And it can be a little unsettling sometimes. You don't know for sure what they're going to say.
Totally.
But that's the world we live in now, that we're not in, when I started marketing a long time ago, you had a lot more, what I would say, control over what your brand messaging was. This is a two-way conversation now. Your customers have input, they can shape where you go. And that's a gift. That's really a gift, and allows you to be agile. Yeah.
And talking about listening and forming that authentic connection with our community, last May for Adweek, you spoke about how important that human connection is to building a brand. How do you build that sustainably? Yeah,
I think it's first we just talked about some of that, like how do you make sure that you have a way for people to have those connections on their own and facilitate that and serve those connections they have on their own. But the human piece of it, like so many of our interactions these days are digital, especially over the last 2 years. How do you provide not a one-way conversation where it's just, I need something from you. I need this information from you. I'm always pulling. How can you provide a gift to your community, something that's a give that doesn't necessarily, and you can do that in multiple ways. You can do that in little surprises that you share with your customers. And I think this webinar is a gift to our customers that Typeform's giving, that they can say like, hey, get a chance to hear from Espree on how they can build a community. So like those gifts where you're not asking for something, and that's human, right? Human giving is really a part of the human experience. And as this two-way conversation. So for me, that's built in, that's a core to who Typeform is. Like we changed how forums work, and a gold standard of this, it's an interaction.
Your forums so human, like they're my favorite.
Yeah, you use it that way, right? So how can you look for those moments, whether it's on your platform or other places, to think about the human experience first and build that in? And oftentimes it's a Typeform, but oftentimes it's not. Handwritten notes or reaching out to somebody individually. Those moments are really important, and especially in this digital world where everything can seem so inauthentic and manufactured and sort of self-serving. Looking for those moments, because it's the right thing to do for long-term, for your customer, but also it helps you stand out, because not a lot of people have mastered that yet.
And feedback is so huge, and it's something we don't do enough of. I think sometimes it scares us to take the time to listen because we're afraid of what we'll hear. And so creating those communication channels and just being really open to the experience is just essential.
Yeah. And the other piece about open to that, I was going to say, like open to feedback, it's no company gets everything right all the time, right? And so the people who take the time to give you feedback, even if it's challenging via the community or whatever channel they use, that's a gift. You really have to look at it as a gift and as an opportunity. They want to see you succeed, or they wouldn't even bother to give you feedback. So how you respond and how you internalize and respond to that feedback and make changes accordingly. Like that's all a part of that big C community building. Like you said, it's not just the platform you're using. It's the way that you show up in the world to the whole community, to all of your stakeholders. So,
I mean, that actually goes into my next question. It's something that really scares me and something I don't have to think about as an indie creator as much as every brand needs to think about is what do you do to show up authentically, but still be responsible of a political and ethical conversation?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's true. These days, the lines are really blurred, and not, everyone expects to understand where is your stance on things, or how are you going to respond. I mean, for me, the first piece is, if you are clear on who you are as a company or as a brand, and what you stand for, and where your vision and mission lie, and how that comes to life in your community, that's the first piece that can help you inform even when you speak up. Right. Internally is one thing with employees, but externally, like sometimes you see brands who are speaking up on issues or showing up on issues where you wonder, what does that have to do with anything? Or if they haven't been living a mission or a vision that gives them, it makes sense to you, why would they be speaking up on this? Because sometimes being silent is more important. I think the second thing is, and we'll talk about this in the key takeaways, is the first thing that I do is test it internally, right? If I'm going to talk to the community about some political or social or whatever issue there may be, how will that feel to my employees? Will that feel authentic if I start talking about an issue that they don't think that we've gotten right internally yet? That also creates a dissonance and something that is just not authentic. It's not the right way to operate. So anchoring on your vision for your company, the mission that you serve, and then do your customers and your employees, would they expect you to speak out? And then what would you do there? So I think that's really important. The second thing is this idea of there can be more than one truth, right? When these issues come up, it's something that we need to be thinking more about. It's not this or that. There can be a lot of and thinking. Now, some issues, no, but many different perspectives, there can be multiple points that are true for different people. And so in places where you let your community members speak and share, the temptation is to kind of jump in and moderate or whatever, but let multiple truths exist at the same time. And I think it's better for everyone to kind of get that feel of how different truths can be present and be honored and be useful for whatever your community goals are at the same time. So it is a little bit more challenging because you've got boards of directors and revenue and those things to think about. But
Totally.
If you start from that position of who am I, and really clear of as a company and a brand, that gives you that core to build from. If you don't have that, it's gonna be really challenging.
I mean, I think a huge theme of this conversation that you've said is just really, truly lean into listening. Like prioritize listening, prioritize compassion. Like, don't be afraid to listen before we start speaking and moderating and controlling. Like, truly listen. Yeah, I love that.
Let it flow. Let it see where it goes a little bit. I mean, if there's complete, inaccuracies, you want to find a diplomatic way or a listening but responsive way to kind of clear things up. If it's in the community and they're saying something that actually isn't, literally isn't true, and that you want to kind of provide some guidance to. I have a question for you, because I think for some of the listeners may be thinking about, how do I get started? How do I build a community? And so you build a lot of different communities. Like, how do you get started? Like, what's some things that maybe indicator that you're ready to start this community building? And what are some steps that people can take if they want to jump into building a vibrant, healthy community? What do you recommend?
Okay, first of all, when you think about the word community, one, I think it's 99% engagement and conversation. The word engagement to me means conversation. It does not mean social media posting. So community is not social media posting.
Right.
And when you think about the word community, be really creative. A community can be a newsletter. It could be a Zoom meetup. It can be held in a platform. It doesn't need to be, it could be at a coffee shop. It doesn't need to, it's not like, okay, I'm going to create XYZ platform and then I have a community. No, it can be anything you want. the essence of the community is so your community members feel seen and connected. So how will you create that as an artist of community to make that happen for them? As we talked about, you want to be a listener. You want to communicate with empathy in balance with having boundaries. The biggest thing to a new community builder is if you don't have your full energy, how can you possibly serve everyone else? So you must be well and energized in order to serve. And remember to set expectations for your community. What is your community culture? It's something I learned from Tony Hsieh at Zappos. What is your community culture code? And then are you following that code to the T so that you're creating that respect, those boundaries for your community? Do people need to show up on time? Must they be heart driven? Must they have already been fully immersed in the activity they're doing for the community you're building? What are the expectations that you have laid down and you continue to share with your community so everyone is operating on the same, the same rule book?
Yeah. I think those are really good points. And, thinking about the missteps that I've made along the way when I've done communities, because we all have. You win some and you learn some. I like to say, it's like if it's a failure, you learn from it and you move forward. Is setting up these really ambitious goals and not really thinking through some of those guardrails that you can have for yourself, for the people who join, like what kind of members are you hoping for, and the resourcing. It takes more time than you think. It really does, because there's the vision that you have for how it's going to go. And then when the community members start joining and they help shape the vision of the community, it's like, oh, we're going here now, I guess, and that's okay. We're serving, not building. But I think that's important. I think that's an important piece, is setting those guardrails, not only, and also for yourself, so that you don't get burned out, or for 100%. Whoever on your team is running the community, or whatever those resources look like. And I think that's really important, and defining what success looks like, Yeah.
100%. One thing I'd love to share is so many people come to me and they want to start a community, but they feel, as indie creators, but they feel like, who am I? I don't know anyone. I'm not important. I get that a lot. I'm like, no. You don't. All that matters to be a community builder is to have the intention to begin to create community, and then be an artist and create. And just decide how you want that community to show up. It starts with one person, 2 people, 3 people. There were 20 of us in the Los Angeles tech community back in the day, and all of us just did little bits of work. And all that little bits of work to build community led to Los Angeles being one of the top startup cities in the world. It's just about doing the coffee house gets-togethers, the Zoom calls. You don't have to have a brand name, be a thought leader. You don't need any connections. You just have to have the intention, and then follow what Karrie and I have suggested today.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I go back to something you said at the very beginning around what matters most is an engagement. And so engagement doesn't mean like, oh, I have a successful community, I have 20,000 members. But if you only have 10,000 members, or 100 of the 20,000 are active, and everybody else is just watching, or it's just never interacted with, the value of that is quite low, except for the people who are interacting. This idea of what's your metric? Is it engagement and value and the feeling that it provides? And so setting those goals up ahead of time, I think, is really important. That it's easy, especially in corporate worlds where you're looking for hard metrics to say, if social's a community, like, oh, I have this many followers and now I have this many, or the community had this many folks and now we have this many, or contributors, that kind of thing. It's easy to fall on those metrics. It's the qualitative that give you the rich story, and how can you think that through? It's an art. It's as much art as science, but like you said, keep serve at the center, and
yes,
that will drive you versus build.
It's my favorite thing. Karrie and I were prepping for this, and my favorite thing, she said, it's about serving. It's not about building. And it's so key. So I want to make sure we both covered the top 3 ways to keep a community engaged and thriving. I feel like I got mine. Do you feel like you got your top 3?
I think that's, for me, the top 3, we're really, really thinking through, like, it's especially for companies, right? And this would be true for an individual or a large company. You have to get the inside straight first, because no matter what, and you might be able to hide it for a while, but who you are on the inside ultimately will show up on the outside. And so getting your own mission, your own vision, your own house in order, et cetera, that helps create an authentic version of community. Because if you have a community manager or, CMO or whomever, you need everyone in your company, everybody in that community to be on the same page, because that's part of the building. So I think that's really important. I think the other thing too is this idea around the guidelines and the boundaries are really important, right? Like you can start with a set, but your community may shape and say, you know what, we actually don't really like that guardrail. Can we change it? It's like, be flexible, be responsive, go a little bit with where it takes you within your mission and vision, I think is really important. And that's part of that thing. You can't set it and forget it. You can't just say like, great, I loaded this platform, I've created some articles, I'm going to throw some stuff up there and it'll just run itself. You have to ask for feedback, get this two-way conversation going. And you talked about how you did that, right? With Typeform or whatever way you want to use, where you can get a hold of community members and find out what's important to them and make connections. And I've been a part of past communities where just sort of naturally we started to get these groups of people who joined, like bunch of people from the construction industry or a bunch of marketers where they were all using the same tool, but it's kind of this birds of a feather even within your own community. You're going to find these little birds of a feather flock together that you want to help nurture that, because it's that serving of what they're looking for. It's really important.
I think a big mistake community builders make is they think they could just launch a platform and then automate the whole thing. And it's what I love about my relationship with Typeform. And again, I'm not saying I've used Typeform the entirety of my community building career. So I have the community communicate with me through Typeform, and then I get on a phone call with them and I get to know them further. And so the way I like to, and then Typeform is amazing and integrates into other platforms I use so I can keep track and take notes on everybody. And so I can see who's interested in what and when I spoke to them, and it's just very easy. The biggest mistake communities builders make is they automate humanness, or aspiring community builders. They automate humanness rather than automate administrative work. So I don't automate being human. I automate like getting the data into my other, worksheet so that I could see what kind of food people like. I don't automate talking to them on the phone, or I really genuinely, it shows that I really care about each person, who they are and how they show up in the world. And I am looking to deeply serve them. So if you're getting into community building, start with like caring. That's the number. Just genuinely care and create so people feel seen. Yeah. I
think that's important. And I think it's interesting too. And we started with this conversation of the difference between like when you create a community, or if you've got a company and you're trying to help people understand, what's happening with your product. And the principles you're talking about are true no matter what scale you're at, right? And some people will come to the community. So for like Typeform, we have people that come to our quote unquote community, and they really are just looking for, like, I need some support, or I need to understand how to use this. And that's okay if that's all they're there for. But naturally, things will start to happen where these other connections will be made, and you need to make space for that and let people do that. Because what ends up happening, and I've had this happen in the past, when you serve, then those community members will serve you. So if you have something happen with your product or your brand, and then you're getting ready to a response, it's a beautiful thing to watch when the community rallies behind you and they answer for you, and they support each other. And if you are doing this right, it's not the why, but if you're doing this right, you will see your advocates and your evangelists and your loyal folks come to your defense is not really the right word, but like help you.
No, totally agree.
Yeah. They will help you through. They will give you a signal on how to respond when things go wrong, as they ultimately will. Everybody's human. So
everybody is human. I think I'd love to like leave on that note before we go into Q&A, that like everyone is human, like especially for brands, for indie creators. That email address, that app install, these are human beings behind that. I mean, sure, sometimes they're bots, but putting aside the bots, they're human beings signing up. And let's look at and treat people as human. And whether they're having a good day or a bad day, we're all just human beings. So as community builders, let's lead with love, compassion, empathy, and truly
Some grace,
be
right?
that source of light.
Yes,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Amazing. Espree, we had those kind of 3 takeaways. Do you feel like, what were your big takeaways? And we can probably switch to the takeaway slide so folks can kind of follow along, but you can go to there and then move into the Q&A.
Yeah, I just felt like really making sure that we show up for one another with empathy, curate our community, and make sure that we're in balance with our boundaries too. Making sure, like, as much community builders are always so giving, and so making sure that we have our boundaries in place and meeting the community where they're at, where they want to be, not trying to force them to be some place where they don't want to be.
Yeah. Amazing. I think we both agree. Serve is the goal, not build. By serving, you may build, but that's a nice after effect.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Thank you. I think we're going to switch to Q&A now. So I don't know if Stuart's going to go on.
This has been amazing.
Yeah, he's going to come back on.
Hi, Stuart.
Hi, and great conversation. I mean, there's, and I think, you almost started this off with what I want to say is sort of defeating that one misconception, which is, form versus served. I'm sure very, very compelling for a lot of people in our audience here. We've got a bunch of audience questions that have been coming in. And I just want to give the two of you a break just for our audience. We want to go for about 10 minutes with some questions. We've got a number that have come in, but I want to invite everyone. If you have any question about the community, forming your own, participating in a community, back and forth, what your role is, how you're going to use that for your marketing, ask away. We're going to get to as many as we can over the next 10 minutes or so. I just want to let you know if we don't get to your question, and frequently we have more than we have a chance to get to, we will be forwarding them over to our sponsor, so there is the opportunity for an offline response. Two other quick reminders here. First off, our webinar is being recorded. It's going to be available on demand. We're sending you a link to that on-demand version about 3:30, 4 o'clock Eastern time today. When you get that, feel free to share it with your colleagues, share it with your community, right? Great resources deserve to be shared. Better yet, have your colleagues register. We'll send them that link directly as soon as it's available. Also, if you want, we had those takeaways. If you want a PDF of those and the rest of the deck, you're going to find a PDF of just that in the cover slide, the speaker slide, in the event resources area. So let's get to some of these questions. I love that there are more keep coming in, so please keep submitting. But I just want to, this is a sort of like an ongoing question here, and that is like, what is the role of a brand in a community? I mean, we're seeing this in a variety of ways, right? You have the one side where a brand has its own community, right? The people it serves, the commonality of the people it serves. But of course, when we're talking about marketing, very often that means a brand's voice in another community. So if I am reaching out to creators because I work at Adweek and I want more creators to pay attention to Adweek's coverage and Adweek's community, and I want to reach out, what is the role of the brand when integrating with existing communities, right? Like, how do you fit your voice in there? And so I'd love to hear again. And so Espree, I'm going to ask you this one first, because undoubtedly, because you have the word tech in your community, you must hear from people constantly about this, brands who want to, like, how do you answer them? How do they fit in seamlessly and don't feel like it's, the version of Hello Fellow Kids kind of thing?
I just think it's what Karrie and I have talked about is first creating that culture that makes sense for us, that's right as a brand, like what feels right and how we want to conduct our community, and then just leading that way, setting expectations and inviting people into the portal of the world that's right for us. So it's all architecting our community. Like, a community doesn't have to be one set thing. It could be anything that makes sense for your brand. And so whatever feels comfortable for your brand is what you should be creating. I feel Karrie is the best to talk about this, though, because you're coming from the point of view of a brand.
Yeah, it's interesting because the question is, how can we enter the community without, in an authentic way? And you go back to what I said earlier, which is, what is your goal? I mean, if you go into a community by saying, like, I'm here so I can grow my business, that's a very self-serving motivation. It's why did you choose that community, and what can you offer them? What value are you going to give them by connecting with and making sure that community understands what you're bringing to the table? So if you're bringing something that can inform, that can, help with their goals, whatever, then that's the first thing. And the second thing is that how you enter, right? So if you enter into a community or join a community or whatever and come in strong with like, I have all the answers versus a lot of listening, right? Like, join the community, listen, understand, give yourself a little bit of time if you're researching a community that you think might benefit from understanding that your brand is out there and how you could give a gift or serve that community. Then I think make sure your intentions are authentic, and then start by listening. Don't just jump in with like, I'm here to save the day. It's a bit of, it's tricky because I'm a marketer and I have revenue goals. I have, all the kind of stuff. So but it was short term, it feels like you want to get started, but for the long term, linking that really closely with what you're serving and listening will pay off. Community is not a short term hit to your business. This is a long term loyalty building type effort.
The word that your answer inspires me is evangelism. I mean, you're thinking about how can I get XYZ really fast, and Karrie's right. You don't want to go into it with what's in it for me. The essence of the community is what's in it for them to serve the community. But what is in it for you on the long term is you essentially create a community of evangelists for your brand. What better way to get customers and sales than referrals?
Yeah. Agreed.
But that raises the other question that I had written down here, which is understanding. We use the term community. We also hear the term fan. Okay. Is there a difference between communities and fans? Right. If I make breakfast cereal, I don't know where I'm pulling this one from, but if I make breakfast cereal, right, I may have people who are just, they really like my product, and they're telling their friends about it. And on a level that's, we call those fans, we call them influencers, we use all these other terminology. I don't know if I necessarily have a community of breakfast enthusiasts, or how are we defining the difference, I guess is sort of the open question on that.
Okay, so community talks to one another. Fan idolizes the person at the top. I think the best community builders have no ego. It is not about thought leadership. It is not about them. It is not about gaining their network. It's literally all about serving, and their artistry is creating this amazing connective experience for others. So I believe community is about relationships with one another, and fandom is about kind of idolizing like Jennifer Aniston or something.
Yeah. I used to work at Coca-Cola, like the community, the fandom around the brand Tab, like that. It's different. Like they had a shared community that they never wanted to get rid of that brand. But yeah, it's a different thing.
I thought it was Fresca.
Fresca also a big fan. One thing that some people, I would say this is, and being in a marketer's shoes, is some people are worried, like what happens if in the community people come in and they start bashing the product, or they start, complaining. And there's a fear there, like what will, the CEO think, or what will other folks in the company think if we have this platform or this way of connecting people and this starts to happen. What I would say is it's happening anyway. And wouldn't you rather have that happen on a platform where you can see it, you can respond to it, you can give, you can understand and listen and view that feedback as a gift, And also, if you've curated the community well, others in the community will also give responses and help solve that problem for you. Because if you don't provide that platform, they will find another place that you may not have visibility to, that you don't have that opportunity to listen and respond, and or have the collective help you with those challenges. So that is a real scenario when people are trying to build a community platform more so and host that people will come in who will stir the pot. It's reality, but I personally would rather have visibility to that and the ability to respond and learn than not know and then have it be a blind spot.
And I think the more often we lead, as we talked about before, with compassion, the more people who are upset about something feel thrown off, like, wait, you're being nice and kind and listening to me and I feel seen. Hold on. Maybe I'm not as angry as I thought. Maybe you're a human too.
Yep.
Espree, let me throw this one your way because I know you saw it, and it's this idea of cohorts. Right. And I would love to know, right, as someone who's like hearing a lot of, right, it's a term we're all there, and not just simply as a cookieless future execution here, but people talk a lot about cohorts now. And so how do cohorts work? What are actually cohorts? And again, how does that relate to community and people benefiting?
Cohorts are my new favorite thing. So I've led 3 cohorts now. Cohorts are community-driven education. And think about it, when you graduate high school, graduate college, it is so hard to make friends as an adult. A cohort is an adult playground where you are also learning, and then you have like-minded connections to form real relationships with long-term. And so whereas a normal course, you log in, you watch it, and you leave, and it's a very solo experience, a cohort is community-driven education. So you're learning with everybody else together and forming friendships along the way. So I just think cohort learning is the coolest. It's just I've formed some incredible relationships through leading my cohorts and then the people in my cohorts. It's very exciting.
So what can you help explain a little bit what it maybe give an example of a cohort? Because this is
Sure. So let's take, like, there's this big cohort called Ship 30, right? And so Ship 30 does a writing cohort. I'll give you 2 examples of cohorts. Does a writing cohort. Everybody writes together for 30 days. Every day they write and they share their writings together. And they're in their circle group, communicating with one another. They're saying, I feel blocked today, or I don't know what to write about, or I'm scared to post publicly. And then everybody could support them together so that they could overcome their fears and then create. But in that supporting one another process, they're starting to gain friendships. Another one, my favorite cohort community of all time, is Small Bets by Daniel Vassallo. Small Bets is amazing. He teaches a lot about essentially the portfolio of being a creator. So kind of like a venture capitalist or a book publisher, they have all sorts of different projects within their firm, and they never know which one is going to take off. He said, why should creators be any different? This word focus can be so confusing. As creators, why don't we have a portfolio of small bets? Because we simply don't know what will take off. And everybody in his community is so kind and heart-driven and intelligent and compassionate. And so just anytime I have a question, I had a question on taxes this past week, I could go to the small bets community and ask them. And every month or so, Daniel Vassallo leads this cohort on that. He teaches us how to have a portfolio of small bets, and it's just so inspiring, and we learn so much and we sync together. So just cohort, I'm all about it. I'm going to do some experimental cohorts coming up in the LA Tech community. I think every brand and every indie creator should be creating a cohort experience. It's just a phenomenal way to bring community together. The last thing I'll say about cohorts, I do think it's important to have an expiration date. If you have something continuing on and on and on in the same cohort, it's like it's not sustainable. It's kind of like a course that goes on forever. So if you have that expiration date of the learning portion and just that connectivity portion happening right after, that's a lot better than this thing that just doesn't have an end date. Yeah.
So that when you use the term education, it's not like a bunch of people sitting around in a lecture, but more I mean, if we think about, I'm going to use an old term of mastermind, or, power of groups, or look, I'm an editor and writer by background. So obviously understanding writing in a group and taking a writing class is not about hearing a lecture about writing, but actually like having the discipline to do X number of pages and get input from people who are doing the same thing, right?
Totally,
to understand and actually, so it's using something for a set amount of time. It sounds to me to actually get to an end. So it could be
100%.
Yeah.
Got
I
it.
think
Got
that's
it.
interesting
Really
because
interesting.
on the education piece, there's like a related question that came through about somebody saying like, by giving to a community, information sharing and knowledge sharing in a community, is that a form of service? And that kind of service isn't very short supply right now. Absolutely. So to answer that question that came in, that is a part of community building. And whether you create a cohort within your community to do that, or you're like, hey, here's what we're seeing, or here's what's happening. And, Typeform has a lot of small businesses as our customers, and what's happening in the world right now. If we can give some information about that in the community, that's a great idea. By the way, I wrote that down. Like, we should be doing that.
Yes.
But like, how do we information beyond just product? Like, what else might be valuable in the community that may impact a big part or cohorts in your community? There's education at the scale that Espree's talking about, but it can happen at scale. You just have to think through. Again, it's that serve. What is valuable to the people in your community, and what are their goals, and what are they trying to achieve? There's lots of mini cohorts everywhere, and it can work out really well.
And one more thing I'll say to that is, like, take Adweek, for example. This week you posted about Liquid Death Water, which is great, and their amazing ad. Like, Adweek is the most exciting publication to pay attention to, because you get to hear about the best ads. Imagine if we could go through a cohort and break down the science of really dynamic ads, but together in community, so that we as brands can create more effective advertising that's more engaging for our audience. I mean, sign me up. I'd be a part of that cohort.
You got a to-do out of this one.
I was about to say, let me talk with our community team. But I mean, something we understand, right? Because we have, for instance, our mentorship program, which connect, we act as a connector between mentors and mentees, always with, again, a time and a goal. And that's one of the things that you're talking about here is like, things don't last, right? Cohorts don't last forever. Cohorts are, 30 days to dissect the best ads in your idea, right? And so everybody sort of has a goal against those things. I got time for one more question. I'm gonna go after. And
yes.
This is another one that keeps coming up, which is platforms. Okay, because you started this off, and the first thing you said, Espree, which is community is not social, but the other side is social has an ability to create communities, right? They're communities that can form within social. It's not posting to social, but it's so. Do you build your communities based on sort of social channels where you might be doing things, right? LinkedIn has its communities or its groups, or however you do that, right? We can go through all the chat, right? Facebook has because we look for ways to connect. So, I can get together with people I went to summer camp with years ago on some of that, right? But it's a community, right? I mean, these are people I have a connection with and still can, talk to. Should you be using them? What's I guess the ultimate question is, and maybe this is another webinar, like, what's the difference? And should you be looking at, like, all platforms? Should a community operate across all platforms? Should it work on a variety of them? I'm sure, again, it's stuff that you face, and probably as well, Karrie, right? How do you do that as it goes on? So
I have so much to say about this. So, Karrie, do you want to go first with Type? Because I could go on and on about this.
Like, from a product perspective, it's very product specific, right? Because Typeform is a product that while it's very easy to use, sometimes people have questions about how or to make sure they get set up or started right. So the natural anchor point for a community there is a lot of people come for help, right? They come for help and they come for inspiration. So that the help piece and having a platform that's associated with our website, it makes sense for companies like ours. if we had a product, like you talk, like a cereal or something like that, your social channels is probably more, you don't need a separate community, right? Your social channels is where people are naturally going to go to. So it depends upon like the functional need of the community when you're serving them. Oftentimes software companies, et cetera, they start with the help need. And so you want to make sure it's really easy for people to find what they want, and it builds from there.
Totally.
Whereas other communities are, in-person based. If I'm a rock climber, I probably got to go somewhere for that community. So the platform is somewhat dictated by your product and by what the audience is looking for. And then the other ones can be an extension of that, but you probably have a primary platform that you start with, and then you can build from there. Doesn't mean I don't have social. We have great social channels there for other things, and they help, but they're not the anchor.
Awesome. And I'd say that the very first thing is a lot of people think that community is like throwing up a Slack group or throwing up a circle or throwing up these kinds of platforms. That is not community. It's very important to build according to the features that you're looking to put together for the community. And so, can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. To put together the features for the community. So I know that with WeAreLATech, so many people said, we want Slack, we want Slack, we want Slack. I built a Slack. Guess how many people used it? It's like really thinking, it's what Karrie's been saying, really listening to them. And rather than letting them dictate what the community should look like and be, you as the community creator, understanding what that should look like that would best serve them. And so are you looking for features where they could talk to one another? Do they want to be on video? Do they want to write one another? Do you want to have text chat? Do you want to have no digital? Like my WeAreLATech summer series has no way to connect digitally. The only thing that I do that is like community-esque is Twitter has a new feature called Twitter Circle. So there's a secret Twitter Circle group for community members to be able to see certain secret posts. That's it. But other than that, there's no way to connect in between, because the idea of the WeAreLATech summer series is to connect in person. And so as a community builder, curate what that experience should look like, and then test. I've tested almost every single community building platforms. They all have pros and cons. So you want to ask yourself, is this creating the impact that I intended to create? If it is not, do I need to switch platforms? There's some platforms that you can't turn the notifications off, which is really uncomfortable and disruptive as a community member. And so you want to test the platforms to see if it works in the way that serves your community best. And without getting too platform specific, because I will end up reading off a million things, I think what's really important is and Karrie and I have talked about this a bunch, workflows. What is the workflow for your community so that you could serve best? Like I've said a million times today, and I was not paid to say this, Typeform, Video Ask are a part, Burb, like these are a part of my creating the process for my communities, my workflows, so that I can serve better. I'm more concerned with my workflows and how I serve the in-between parts of the administrative than I am with the platform itself.
I wish we could keep going. Espree and Karrie, I really appreciate the time, and thanks for again sticking around and answering questions. We went a little longer on the Q&A than I think we originally had budgeted, but I'm glad we did, because people were sticking around. They want to hear our answers, and they want to hear all of this stuff. So really appreciate your time and your insights on all of this. Just to our audience, final reminders here again, you're getting a link to the on-demand version. Share it out there, get this conversation out to your community. You want the slides, well, you want those takeaways. You're going to find it in event resources. Lastly, adweek.com/webinars, our webinar calendar. See what's coming up. We hope we've got webinars that are of interest to you. Sign up for them. Check out the on-demand archive. Look for those, the two we did with Typeform, one last month and one the month before that, all great conversations. So again, I want to thank our speakers. I want to thank our sponsors at Typeform. I want to thank our audience for taking time out of your busy day and we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.